Off the coast of New Jersey, expert divers John Chatterton and Richie Kohler discovered a sealed Nazi submarine resting in unexpected waters.
The World War II submarine that went down in battle with so many questions, what a team of explorers just found.
Over months of careful exploration, they documented preserved bunks, personal belongings, and structural damage frozen in place. What they uncovered inside would force historians to rethink everything previously believed about World War II history.
117.
117.
That's not a U-boat number, though.
Oh, well, wait a minute, right here. U-869.
A wreck emerges from the depths. In the early 1990s, two names already carried weight in the deep wreck diving world. John Chatterton and Richie Kohler were not casual divers chasing excitement. They were technical specialists known for pushing into places most people would never enter. According to other divers who worked with them, they were calm under pressure and precise in planning. They chose their sites carefully, and when they committed to a dive, they accepted that mistakes could be fatal.
Well, that particular object measures approximately 90 meters in length.
Oh my gosh, that looks awfully like a submarine.
The location that drew their attention sat far off the coast of New Jersey, roughly 60 miles from Point Pleasant. This was not a place people visited for sightseeing. The water there had a reputation. Strong currents moved without warning. Visibility often dropped to almost nothing. Old fishing nets covered the bottom like traps waiting to close. Locals who worked at sea had long considered the area dangerous and unpredictable. The depth alone placed the dive beyond anything recreational. According to diving reports, reaching the bottom required long preparation, special equipment, and strict timing. Once submerged, there was no room for panic. Every movement had to be deliberate. Chatterton and Kohler understood this, yet they still went down. Something on the sonar readings had caught their attention, and it did not look like a normal shipwreck. As the sonar's sweep sharpened, an elongated metallic shape appeared on the screen. It was narrow, symmetrical, and far too clean to be natural rock. At first, they did not jump to conclusions. Wreck divers are trained to doubt first impressions. Still, the outline was unsettling. It looked manufactured. It looked purposeful. When they descended for the first visual confirmation, the conditions turned against them almost immediately. The current pulled hard. Loose nets brushed against their equipment. Visibility dropped so low that shapes appeared only at the last moment. Then the wreck emerged from the darkness. It rested quietly on the ocean floor, untouched, heavy, and intact. According to later accounts, both divers felt a surge of unease. This was not a broken ship scattered by time. This was something whole. As they moved closer, the details became clearer. The surface was steel, not stone. The curves were smooth and deliberate. The structure was too narrow for a cargo ship and too long to be debris. According to reports from the dive team, the realization came slowly and then all at once. This was not just a wreck. This was a vessel built for war. The hull shape removed any remaining doubt. It matched the design of a German military submarine. There was no mistaking it. Civilian ships do not look like this. Fishing vessels do not sink this way. The moment hit hard. Shock was followed by worry. A submarine meant weapons, history, and unanswered questions. It also meant danger. Submarines were never designed to be entered decades later. Finding a submarine was shocking enough, but its location raised a far more troubling question. When records fail. After surfacing from their first dive, John Chatterton and Richie Kohler reported their find to the appropriate maritime authorities and naval historians. They provided the exact coordinates of the wreck, along with detailed measurements and photographs. Every reading, every angle, every depth measurement was carefully documented to ensure accuracy. The submarine lay unusually close to the American coastline, about 60 miles offshore from Point Pleasant, New Jersey. According to local maritime records, nobody had expected a German submarine in these waters. Its presence immediately raised questions. The authorities turned to official records to verify the discovery. U.S. Navy wartime loss logs were reviewed by naval researchers, and Allied anti-submarine warfare reports were carefully examined. According to declassified documents, no German submarine had been reported missing near New Jersey during the final years of World War II. Local maritime experts confirmed that this section of the Atlantic coast had been considered secure and closely monitored during the war. Some believe that if a German submarine had been present, it would have been noted in naval dispatches or intercepted communications. Historians cross-checked multiple sources. Every patrol record, sonar sweep, and destroyer engagement report was consulted. According to reports, there were no recorded battles, attacks, or sinkings in the area where the wreck rested. As more experts became involved, the historical mismatch grew more striking. Analysts noted that the Atlantic coastline had been monitored intensively by the Allies. Every submarine loss during the war had normally been documented with location, ship name, and crew information. Yet here was a vessel whose existence in these waters had been completely unrecorded. Some researchers speculated that the submarine might have been operating under secret orders, while others suggested clerical errors had obscured its true history. Either way, it challenged decades of accepted naval history. The wreck had created a problem that could not be ignored. According to naval historians, it is extremely rare for physical evidence to contradict official records so completely. Usually, every sunken vessel can be accounted for through logs, reports, and patrol documentation. Some experts warned that this could be the start of a much larger revelation about wartime mistakes or misclassified missions. For Chatterton and Kohler, the realization was tense and immediate. Their discovery was no longer just an extraordinary dive. It had become a puzzle that demanded expert attention. If the records offered no answers, the wreck itself would have to speak. The knife that spoke. After the wreck was documented and reported, attention shifted to the debris scattered around the submarine. Divers returned to the site with the goal of carefully examining what lay nearby. Among broken pipes, fragments of metal, and remnants of machinery, some objects immediately stood out. According to dive logs, these items were clearly personal belongings, objects that had once been used by the crew rather than parts of the submarine or random debris. Their presence hinted at a human story waiting to be uncovered. The first unmistakable clue came in the form of a simple utensil, a butter knife, slightly corroded but still readable, had the name Henberg engraved on the handle.
There was a name inscribed into the handle, and the name was Hornberg.
The inscription followed typical German naval naming conventions, suggesting it belonged to a crew member rather than a civilian or random passenger. According to reports from dive teams and experts who analyzed the find, this small object instantly changed the approach to the investigation. The presence of a named personal item meant that the submarine was tied to specific people, not just steel and machinery. Experts brought in to examine the knife emphasized its importance. Personal effects like this were rarely preserved unless a wreck had been sealed or undisturbed for a long period. According to reports, the name Henberg allowed researchers to begin cross-checking German naval archives for a crew member's service history. For the first time, the wreck was no longer anonymous. It carried a human identity. The divers recovered additional items in the surrounding area. Pieces of clothing, fragments of a personal locker, and remnants of documents were carefully documented and photographed before being handed to experts. According to maritime historians, it was rare to find personal belongings so well preserved at this depth. Together with the knife, these objects confirmed that the wreck held tangible traces of the crew who had once lived on board. One name now anchored the mystery to reality, providing a trail that could finally be followed. Identity proven. Once the first human clue had been found, the investigation shifted to the interior of the submarine. Divers returned to the wreck with extreme caution. Every movement had to be deliberate. The interior was dark, cramped, and unstable. According to dive reports, even brushing against a panel could dislodge debris or damage fragile equipment. Each step was measured, each observation logged meticulously. Every lever, engine component, and control panel was photographed and documented. The divers understood that this was more than exploration. Every detail could be the proof that tied the wreck to history. Inside the engine room, the first breakthroughs appeared. Stamped serial numbers on engines, pipes, and mechanical parts were uncovered. The markings were crisp and unmistakable, though coated in decades of corrosion. Experts later explained that German shipyards engraved each critical component with unique codes. According to naval engineers, these numbers could be traced back to the exact shipyard and to the specific vessel it had been built for. For the divers, holding these parts and reading the numbers was tense and thrilling. Every serial number raised the stakes, proving that this wreck was not just a generic submarine. The next step involved cross-referencing the numbers. Researchers traced each code to a single German shipyard in Bremen. According to some historians, the shipyard had built only one submarine with this exact combination of components at that time. The engine configurations, the placement of fuel tanks, and the machinery layout matched perfectly with a Type 9C submarine. The divers and archival team felt a rising sense of certainty. Each confirmation made the wreck's identity less of a mystery and more of a revelation. Even the documents found inside helped. Flooded compartments had preserved papers and schematics in surprising condition. According to dive logs, some pages were swollen and water-stained, but the text and numbers were still legible. Experts noted that oil residue and airtight seals had acted as a preservative, keeping these fragile records intact for decades. The divers carefully photographed each sheet before it was handled by researchers. These documents matched the recovered parts exactly, providing an additional layer of verification. When the pieces were assembled, the evidence became overwhelming. Every engine part, every stamped plate, and every preserved document pointed to a single conclusion. This was U-869. According to experts who examined the findings, the confirmation was definitive. The wreck had been anonymous for decades, but the combination of serial numbers, internal design, and archival records left no doubt. According to reports, the divers and researchers experienced a mixture of awe, relief, and tension. They were holding proof that history had been recorded incorrectly for half a century. The submarine was no longer just a mystery lying on the ocean floor. It had a name, a story, and a place in history. With U-869's identity confirmed, the focus shifted. The wreck was no longer a strange anomaly off the coast of New Jersey. It was a vessel thought lost far from these waters, a ship whose true fate had been misrecorded. The discovery demanded answers. If this was U-869, the next question was clear. What had history believed had already happened to it? The story history told. U-869 was built in the midst of a desperate war. Launched from the German shipyard in Bremen in 1943, it was part of the Type 9C class designed for long-range missions. The submarine measured nearly 250 feet and was armed with 6 torpedo tubes, capable of striking enemy ships from hundreds of miles away. It was engineered to be stealthy, efficient, and lethal. The men who trained to serve on it were young, disciplined, and prepared to face danger beneath the waves. They knew every inch of the vessel, from the engine room to the cramped bunks, and they carried the weight of the war with them into the Atlantic. By late 1944, U-869 received its patrol orders. Official German naval records show that it was instructed to operate near Gibraltar, a strategic choke point for Allied shipping. The submarine's mission was straightforward: disrupt enemy supply lines and return safely. Its crew prepared meticulously, checking torpedoes, running drills, and memorizing every procedure. The atmosphere aboard was tense but focused. Each man understood that failure meant death. In February of 1945, reports from Allied forces claimed that a German submarine had been sunk near Gibraltar. 2 destroyer escorts were credited with the destruction, and the loss was quickly logged in official records. The U-869 was declared destroyed. The Navy, historians, and even German officials accepted this report as the final word. The details of the submarine's last moments were sparse, reduced to coordinates, timestamps, and a tally of presumed casualties. Families of the 56 men aboard were notified that their loved ones had been lost in action, far from home, and the event was recorded as an unquestioned historical fact. The sinking of U-869 was not merely a military statistic. It became a fixed point in history, a story told in naval archives, textbooks, and memorials. Scholars referenced the loss repeatedly, and the names of the crew were inscribed in honor rolls. For decades, no one suspected that the official account could be wrong. The submarine, the crew, and its final mission were set in stone, or so everyone believed. Historians later noted that the record was built on assumptions. Wartime communications were chaotic. The Allies, operating under pressure, recorded the first plausible engagement as the final truth. German command, never receiving a confirmed report from the vessel, marked it lost near Gibraltar. The narrative fit neatly and required no further investigation. It became convenient for both sides to close the case. For the families, the story was final. Grief was accepted, memorials were built, and lives moved on. Yet the men themselves, their experiences, their fears, and their final moments remained invisible in the official account. The coordinates, the logs, and the engagement reports could never capture the reality of what they endured or where they truly perished. The records reduced human lives to numbers and positions on a map, erasing the details that made their existence real. The dark truth.
What began with a fisherman's accident now starts these divers on a journey through the dark history of World War II.
As the interior search progressed, the divers began to notice damage patterns that did not match any known external attack. Inside the submarine, the corridors were narrow, dark, and unstable. Every movement had to be measured. Their lights swept across steel walls that appeared warped in a deliberate way. Large sections of the inner hull were bent sharply inward. The deformation was clean and focused, not torn or scattered. This was not damage caused by depth pressure or enemy fire. It suggested that a powerful force had detonated from within the submarine itself. The divers moved deeper toward the torpedo room, where the damage became more precise and more disturbing. One torpedo tube was forced open, its inner door twisted outward from the inside. The tube beside it remained sealed and untouched. The contrast immediately raised concern. The direction of the blast damage pointed inward, not outward. This indicated that the explosion had originated inside the vessel. Later comparisons were made to known wartime accidents. Some reports described torpedoes known as circle runners, weapons that malfunctioned after launch and curved back toward the submarine that fired them. Such failures had destroyed other U-boats during the war. However, the damage inside U-869 did not fully align with those incidents. As the divers continued into the aft section, they encountered an unexpected discovery. Several metal crates were stacked neatly along the corridor floor. They were sealed with corroded clamps and placed in areas not typically used for storage. The boxes were unmarked and absent from known submarine layouts. On one crate, a faint insignia became visible under the light. It showed an eagle gripping a swastika. The divers stopped immediately. The symbol suggested the cargo was official and intentional, not improvised or routine. Every detail was documented carefully. Later analysis produced conflicting theories. Some experts believed the crates may have held spare parts or specialized fuel. Others believed the cargo was far more dangerous. Records from the final months of the war show that Germany was developing chemical weapons such as tabun and sarin. If such substances had been on board, even a small leak or temperature shift could have triggered a deadly reaction. Inside the sealed hull, this could have caused rapid ignition and internal overpressure, producing the precise inward blast seen in the steel. A thin, pale film coated parts of the aft bulkhead. Some identified it as salt corrosion. Others noted similarities to residue associated with chemical exposure. No conclusion could be confirmed. While moving through the control room, the divers experienced a moment none of them expected. Near one hatch, a shape appeared briefly at the edge of the light. It resembled a human outline and remained completely still. When the light shifted, the shape vanished into the darkness. The moment lasted only seconds, but the silence that followed was heavy. What remained was to understand the lives that had been frozen in that final moment. Life frozen in time. Every step inside U-869 had to be careful. The narrow corridors were cluttered with debris, bent steel, and broken machinery, yet the sleeping quarters remained eerily intact. Bunks were in place, personal items carefully stowed, and even small objects like brushes, shoes, and ration tins rested where they had been left decades earlier. The divers noticed the subtle signs of routine. Some clothing was folded neatly, notebooks sat open on tables, and scattered papers suggested that men had been working or writing just hours before disaster struck. Among the items, they discovered handwritten notes and a small journal. The entries were brief but vivid. Sailors wrote about the monotony of patrols, the anxiety of waiting for orders, and their longing for home. There were mentions of wives, children, and parents, revealing the emotional strain of life underwater. The words were simple, yet the feelings behind them were immediate and raw. Every corner of the submarine told the same story. There were no overturned chairs, no scattered tools, no signs of panic. The living spaces were a snapshot of normality, preserved under layers of salt and darkness. According to reports from maritime historians, it was rare to find a wreck that conveyed both the violence of its destruction and the quiet humanity of those who lived aboard it. In the weeks following the interior exploration, researchers began trying to connect the dots of how U-869 had ended up off the coast of New Jersey. Post-expedition analysis showed details that did not match the official record. Torpedo tubes remained unfired. Fuel range calculations suggested the sub had traveled far beyond its assigned patrol zone, and structural damage indicated an internal explosion rather than enemy attack. Combined, these clues pointed to a quiet transit rather than a battle. Some experts speculated that the submarine had been redirected, delayed, or assigned a secret mission never properly documented. Whatever the case, the men inside were following routine when everything ended at once. If you enjoyed watching this video, kindly hit the like button and subscribe to this channel.